Hi, everyone. Welcome to That Tracks, Lincoln Park Zoo's podcast. I'm Jillian Rader, and today with me we have...
My name is Jason Work. I'm the director of the Animal Welfare Science Program at Lincoln Park Zoo.
And today we're talking all about animal welfare. That is their holistic experience and how the zoo monitors that with data-informed science and how we understand their experiences from animals with disabilities to those experiencing a loss and everything in between. So, Jason, let's start at the top. How can you tell if an animal is happy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So animal welfare is really those feelings of the animal, that subjective experience of the animal. And really we work to use scientific methods to really understand animal welfare, largely drawing from the field of ethology, so the study of animal behavior. And so we have a pretty rigorous behavior monitoring program here, and we look for different behaviors. Some of the behaviors specifically that we focus a lot on are natural behaviors of the animal. So we're seeing certainly some of those right here with the giraffes and the browsing behaviors. So looking at promoting those natural behaviors is really, really key there for us.
And when you talk about natural behaviors and natural history and things like that, what's your metric? So for giraffes, for example, and you talked about browse and eating, like how do you know how many hours a day or how much of their time they should be spending doing that?
Yeah, that is a great question. So giraffe in the wild would spend the majority of their day browsing off of leaves. So the trees that they feed on in the wild would be acacia trees, and acacia trees in the wild fight back quite a bit, right? So they have thorns, they have a symbiotic relationship with ants that bite the giraffe. And so there is a lot of fighting back from the plants in the wild. And so I think one of the things that we really work to do here is really try to figure out how do we take those challenges and apply that to our care. So a lot of the extractive foraging you're seeing here with the giraffes is some of that natural behavior and trying to find those analogs in terms of how much of the behavior, certainly there's going to be differences there between the wild and what animals in the zoo experience. So.
Yeah. I think that's so interesting because we think about giraffes as a prey species and so like running from lions, but you don't think of like the trees fighting back and like little biting ants.
Yep. So. Ants biting them, yeah.
But I do think that is a really good example of the animal experience. Not everything is easy breezy. Like it is a very experiential life, whether you're just eating or grazing. So what are some other things that we have either like in habitats or with the animals here that help them experience like a full life?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of our focus is around feeding and foraging behaviors because that is, such a fundamental component of the lives of natural animals is how do I find food? Where's the food? And so there's a lot that we focus on there with our monitoring program of like really looking specifically at the types of feeding behaviors that we see in the different animals. So for, giraffes, we're thinking about browsing, but other species, it might be grazing behaviors. It might be for our red river hogs outside, it might be rooting behaviors. So a lot of different types of feeding and foraging behaviors there. And that's really where our care team comes in and shines. A lot of the work here in getting that food up so high and making it hard for the animals is really the amazing work of the care team to try to simulate those experiences for the animals.
And you mentioned tools, one of which is Zoo Monitor. Can you tell me a bit more about what that is and like how you're measuring these types of activities?
Yeah, so I mentioned that we study animal behavior. And so we, as they say, I think they still say there's an app for that. I'm not sure if they still say that. But yeah, so we developed the Zoo Monitor app. So it's a tool that you can use on tablet devices to easily record behavior and how they use their space. So what are they doing and where are they at in their spaces? And that can be really helpful to understand that animal welfare piece, that dimension for us. And so with the Zoo Monitor app, we have a team of volunteers, interns, and staff here that use that every single day to record what the animals are doing. And then we in the Welfare Science Program work to take all that data and get that back to our managers to make informed decisions.
And can you tell me, it's now huge, it's everywhere, Zoo Monitor. You've been here for the whole sort of journey of it. Can you talk a little bit about how the scale has grown so much over the past?
Yeah, it has grown quite a bit. So we launched the Zoo Monitor app back in 2016, and now we have over 2,000 organizations around the world that have signed up for Zoo Monitor.
Incredible.
I have certainly been on international trips at zoos around the world, and I hear a beep, and I'm like, I know that beep. And that's Zoo Monitor happening all around the world right now. So it's really powerful to kind of see that growth and spread and just all of the impact that it's had for zoos, aquariums, sanctuaries, you name it, all around the
Yeah.
world, I think is really powerful.
That's awesome. And part of that too, it started maybe as an app here and then some testing sites, but now also it has this cross functionality of multi-institutional studies. Can you share an example of one that you've been a part of or has been successful and what you learned from it?
Yeah. So I am very excited to talk. I mean, that's certainly something I'm very passionate about is that multi-institutional research. So that's one of the newest areas that we built into ZooMonitor. And one of the projects that we did as our pilot project with those new tools was with giraffe, actually, right here. And so we did a large multi-institutional study of giraffe. And so we recorded the behavior and space use of giraffe at zoos around the country. And so these were all zoos accredited by the Association of Zoos and Aquariums. So with that broader the sampling of giraffes around the country, we were able to learn a lot of like bigger insights than we can ever learn from a single institution. So like our behavior data here is really powerful for welfare to understand, our two giraffes, Finley and Ray, right? But it can be challenging to learn about giraffes more broadly as a species. And that's really where that multi-institutional data comes in and is so powerful in that it really gives us that opportunity to look at that natural variation in things like housing and husbandry and really be able to learn and generate insights on how that can impact welfare and behavior of animals.
Yeah, that's great. Is there like one or two takeaways you learned from that study that were perhaps like surprising or new information?
Yeah, so with the giraffe study, so we had talked a little bit about their browsing behavior, how important that is for giraffe. And one of the things that was really encouraging to see in the multi-institutional study is that we saw that the amount of time that giraffes spent browsing across the different institutions was pretty high, and it was actually higher than what had been reported in past multi-institutional studies. So there's been a lot of attention to like getting giraffe to feed, more prolonged feeding bouts and making feeding a lot more challenging to giraffe. And so that's been a big community-wide focus on a lot of zoos. And so being able to see that manifest in the data is really powerful and actually see that change happening there. I would also say too, like internally here at Lincoln Park Zoo, we also had some of the highest levels of browsing behavior and extractive foraging behavior of any organization that was in that broader study there. And so I think that is a huge testament to the care team here and all the work that they do to have those challenges for the giraffe and promoting those natural behaviors.
That's great.
Yeah.
The scale of a multi-institutional, multi-giraffe or any species study is so great. But I think another thing when we're talking about welfare and well-being is that at the end of the day, too, it comes down to the individual. So how are you measuring or balancing, I guess, population versus individual? What does that look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say a lot of like our internal conversations are largely fueled off of that individual driven work that we do here at Lincoln Park Zoo. I think the broader multi-institutional work that we do as well really helps us understand the species, and that can really guide care practices and guidelines that are being developed more broadly. So if we were to design like a new giraffe habitat, for instance, we would have really good data-driven information to understand how, what to put into those that design there.
Yeah. And as far as preferences, what are some ways that you address that as a scientist and I guess in collaboration with the care team? How do those preferences manifest in a daily care setting?
Yeah, so we certainly are always trying to understand, a core question is like, what do animals want, right? We know providing choice and opportunities for those natural behaviors is fundamental to promoting good welfare. And so that can manifest in a lot of different ways of how we present that choice to animals. Of course, we have an enrichment program here that is always working to provide unique dynamic experiences to animals every single day. And so a lot of our data can help drive and inform that process too of like, what is working? Is this enrichment successful? Is it promoting the behaviors we think it's promoting? And so that's where we can really get a lot of information out of our behavior data.
Yeah. And for maybe giraffes where browsing is a pretty obvious behavior, or primates where their facial expressions are a little bit easier to read, those feel perhaps a little more easy to understand. But for some creatures that maybe don't move that much as part of their natural history or don't have a ton of expressions, how do you measure these like sort of misunderstood or understudied species?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we have, historically, we recognize that a lot of the research that's been done in welfare science to understand what is important for welfare and even how to study animal welfare, what behaviors to even think about, are largely or traditionally mammals and birds. A lot of the research has been in those for those taxa. And so to your point about understudied species, certainly reptiles and amphibians are a big area that has been largely underexplored, understudied there. And so we've done a number of studies there to understand those preferences. And so we kind of still approach it not that different than how we would approach it for mammals, largely speaking. We'll provide different choices, look at their behavior before and after, and evaluate it from there. And so some of the studies work that we've done is like looking at substrate preferences of turtles. Right now we're doing a study looking at preferences for different privacy options for snakes and privacy opportunities for snakes. And so some different work there just to understand what those animals want. But I would say, like, to your point about the challenges, it is real. Like, you have snakes, some snakes are sit and wait ambush predators that don't do as much, right? And so I think there we are looking at other ways that we can maybe explore that. Certainly we've done research with toads and frogs, trying to understand, like, can we use their posture to maybe understand welfare? Like, how are they standing? Can that tell us something meaningful? And so trying to glean insights from whatever information we can get from the animals.
From a purely logistics standpoint, do those studies take longer for something like a sit and wait predator? Does it just take longer?
That's a great question. I would say no, we generally don't have those studies take longer, but we do need to interpret maybe on a different time scale.
Okay.
And a lot of those studies we have also done have been more 24-hour monitoring. So maybe that is a little bit longer. So a lot of our observations are generally during the daytime for a lot of our species, but some of those species are nocturnal and they also work at different time scales, right? So they're not going to be as active as our giraffes are going to be. And so we do certainly think about how do we capture that and how do we replicate that more broadly. But yeah.
You mentioned 24 hours, and you also mentioned your team. So we can't be here 24 hours a day. So what are some of the tools that you're using to get those like overnight observations, or what is that? Are you watching videos back? Like, how does that process work?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So we have, we'll have camera systems installed in some of the different habitats that we're monitoring those species that we know are nocturnal and might have those overnight behaviors. And so we have teams that can help collect those observations, record that behavior data of those animals when we aren't physically present here at the zoo. So we really understand more holistically, what is their experience across the entire day.
Is there anything that you've seen in those overnight observations that like perhaps surprised you, where we had never seen during the daytime before for any species?
Well, I think, thinking the snakes in the Regenstein small mammal reptile house, some of those are nocturnal species. So just even seeing them active is kind of a unique thing. Our African rock python there, a lot of guests, if you were to go to see them, you probably aren't going to see your African rock python doing much during the day, but at night, she's a pretty active individual. And you do actually see that individual going down and using a lot more of the habitat, using the water features and stuff like that. And so I think those opportunities to really appreciate the full diversity of what they're doing across the entire day and not just limit it to us being diurnal mammals and have that bias in our behavior data, I think is really important.
I think I saw a video of that rock python swimming and it was very cool.
Yeah.
What is, sort of zooming back again, there's a lot of vocabulary that comes with the welfare world. There's welfare, well-being, happiness, care. What is sort of the core differences you see between like care and welfare, or welfare and well-being? How are they different? How are they the same?
Yeah, maybe I'll start with welfare and well-being there first.
Sure.
So those terms I would say are largely fairly similar, right? They're both speaking to the animal's experience there. Animal well-being is a newer term that's been adopted that is really more looking at those positive experiences of an animal. So when we think about happiness, that's a little bit more equivalent to when we're talking about animal well-being. Animal welfare is a traditionally more historic term that has defined this field. And so that's really the whole holistic experience of the animal, both negative and positive there. In terms of animal care / well-being, and animal care, that's really two sides of the coin of what, amazing care looks like at Lincoln Park Zoo. Is the animal welfare side is the animal's experience, and the care is what we're doing as people, right? So the care is our people dimension side of all of the practice that we do and our, how we're simulating these behaviors. The experience of the animals is really the welfare side of that coin.
Well, so care is an input. What are some other inputs that like perhaps you're measuring or you're trying to understand when looking at an individual's experience?
Yeah, so I mean, I would say broadly speaking, thinking about environmental inputs as well. We certainly think a lot about temperature and weather and stuff like that. And so that has really been applied in a lot of our different projects and behavior data. We record that behavior data of like how much are they using the shade opportunities in the space, for outdoor species. So environmental aspects, I would say, is another big one. And then also the social dimension too. I mean, we think a lot about the care defining that welfare. I mean, it is a really holistic experience that defines animal welfare, right? And so that is the experience of other individuals in their group. It is the environment, and it is as well what we put into that with our input there too.
Great. If you are finding through your observations or through chatting with the keeper staff that an individual is not perhaps like thriving in the way that we think or foraging as much as they should or something, what are some, like, what is your approach to that? Are we monitoring and then making changes? Are we relying on keeper observations? How does that process kind of work here?
I would say both,
Okay.
right? So I think we get really valuable, rich information from the keepers that know the animals the best, right? I think we each provide different pieces of information to complete this puzzle of trying to understand the animal experience. For us, it's really the objective behavior data that we get with our monitoring program is really powerful in that. And so for us, to answer your question, like we work to really generate those insights, provide that information back to the managers, and so they can make those informed decisions with that data-driven understanding of what the animals are doing and how they use their spaces.
And how are you? So I've heard, we talked a little bit with Siga, our nutrition center manager, about how like diet is not just one meal. It's like over the course of a week or a month. And welfare is not just 1 second in time. It's your whole life experience. So how are you balancing like a good day versus a bad day versus a good year? Or like, a lot of these animals go through circle of life, loss of a companion or things like that. How are you monitoring that and judging sort of their holistic experience over the course of time?
Yeah, so we
Kind
have
of a big question.
yes,
Sorry.
yeah. We have different approaches, I would say, for different experiences that the animal might have, right? So if there is a loss of a companion, we have a separate protocol that gets put into place to help monitor that individual and make sure that we have a really close understanding of their welfare and how is that changing from those changes that are happening. I would say more broadly, it's really in our interpretation too of the information. Our behavior data is dispersed, right? We're getting small snippets of what they're doing throughout the day across the week. And really it's working to kind of pull all that information together. And it's how we interpret it, I would say, is a large piece of, getting to that larger understanding of their holistic experience is really what we're after there.
Yeah. In your time in this field, what has been sort of the greatest advancement or understanding that you've
And I can't say
experienced?
Zoo Monitor.
You
So,
can.
okay. I would certainly say just the growth of behavior monitoring and evidence-based practices. Of course, as a scientist, I'm a bit biased there. I certainly love data, but data nerd. But seeing that growth in really applying data into the fundamental practice of animal care, I think is a really powerful shift that has happened across the community, over certainly the last 2 decades, really has picked up a lot in the last decade. And so I think being able to have that supplement, sort of the understanding that our experts in these species and in these individuals have, I think it really is a beautiful marriage of two different processes there.
And then where do you see it going? What does welfare science look like in 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I guess I would certainly say the growth of that, certainly as opportunities start presenting with automated behavior monitoring, that's certainly an exciting development of that's happening across zoos there of like, how could we really be able to get that data 24/7 automated and really be able to scale that up to, all the species that are cared for at a zoo. I think that's really exciting. I think also too, the broadening of that umbrella, right? Our tagline is, of course, for wildlife for all. And I think very much as a welfare scientist, for all wildlife, right? And so as we sort of have broadened that scale, which we've done here at Lincoln Park Zoo, and thinking, not just about the mammals and birds, but the reptiles, the amphibians, a lot of our other species that we're focusing on as well, and other situations, I think that's a really exciting development of just really appreciating the experience of all the animals that are under the care of the zoo.
So we talked about individuality and preferences and things like that. We also have, not every animal is the same either. They might have different personalities, they might have different physical abilities. How are we measuring those individual differences as well?
Yeah, that's, I mean, I think when I was talking about broadening that umbrella of, for all wildlife, certainly we have animals with disabilities here under our care at Lincoln Park Zoo. And we've done surveys too to see that that's pretty common. Pretty much all zoos have animals that they care for that have a disability. And so one of the big areas that we've been also thinking and working towards is how do we provide those accommodations, right? So that is the term that we typically use with people, and that's the same term we would use with animals. So of course, like right here on my face, I have an accommodation, right, for my disability. And so how do we present those in the habitats for those animals that might have physical disabilities, and how do we reshape that so they can still perform and display those natural behaviors that they would otherwise do?
So it's about natural behaviors, and we've talked about nocturnal species and things, but I'm also thinking about, the like diggers and the tunnel makers. How do you measure something like in that category, like a naked mole rat that you can't always see?
Yeah. So I mean, I think, broadly speaking, we really work hard to think of how can we promote those natural behaviors. We've obviously talked a lot about the natural feeding and foraging behaviors, but digging is, a key natural behavior for naked mole rats. So they are a fossorial species. They live pretty much their entire lives underground in the wild. And dig extensive tunnel networks. But the way zoo habitats are often designed is those tunnels are provided for them, right? So we take away some of that challenge. And so that really led us to thinking about, well, how can we provide them that opportunity to still do those digging behaviors? And so if you go over to the Regency Small Mammal Reptile House, you'll see to the right of their tunnel system, there is a area there that has compact soil that they can go in and excavate. We fondly nicknamed it the dig pit. And through our welfare science program, we evaluated what having that opportunity for that digging through the dig pit, how their behavior was before and after that opportunity. And we saw really great behaviors like, increased exploration, increased positive social behaviors between the naked mole rats. So really good evidence, I think, for us to show that it was a positive improvement on their welfare.
What does a positive naked mole rat interaction look like for those of us who are not welfare scientists?
Yeah, they purr and wag their tail. So I would say, really it's having those opportunities to look at those behaviors like, the exploration, making sure that they're using more of their space. Those positive social behaviors too, I think were a really key guide of like how we were interpreting that this was an improvement. I would also say just the simple fact that when we provided that dig pit to them, they excavated it within I think the first 30 minutes or so. So certainly there was a lot of amazing behavior we saw right off the bat that were pretty indicative that they like digging.
Yeah.
And so that's something that we've been working to always provide them. And we have to go back and replenish that soil. It's a lot of work from the care team to promote these behaviors. But it's really a fantastic experience for the naked mole rats to be able to still have that digging opportunity.
Great. All right, Jason. Can you tell me, so obviously animal welfare is your passion, zoo monitor and analyzing and the data, but who is Jason outside of the zoo? What brings you joy when you're not here with the animals?
Yeah, I would say definitely my daughter. So I have a 3-year-old daughter at home who I love tremendously. So anytime that I get to spend with her and any of the opportunities to be singing Disney show tunes and watching Disney movies is always an amazing experience for me.
Nice. And what about, I heard you like to build miniatures?
Paint, yes,
Paint.
Yes. I do
What
love
does that look like? Do you have a theme? Is there are they Disney?
They're not Disney. No, Disney would probably not legally allow that. So generally kind of some fantasy miniatures. I really am excited to start working in painting some more animal miniatures. I mean, just bringing together my passions in life. But yeah, so really small little things. I think as a welfare scientist, I'm just a very detail-oriented person, and it really tickles. Yes, it really tickles that itch of being very detail-oriented and spending hours obsessing over the painting of an eyeball, for instance, or something like that. So I think it really can drive a little bit of that passion for me.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We learned so much. And where can we find out more about animal welfare at Lincoln Park Zoo?
Yeah, of course, coming to the zoo is a great way to see it in action. So as you come around the zoo, if you hear an iPad beeping or you see somebody using it, that's our welfare science in action. That's our Zoo Monitor app. And of course, seeing all of these amazing experiences is a great way to see it in action. Our website And of course, all of our social media channels would be a great opportunity to see all the amazing natural behaviors that we have our animals, we promote with our animals.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Yeah.